Thanks for watching The Thought Criminals, named after the resistance to the totalitarian thought police of George Orwell's 1984, which we now refer to as being woke. I'm your host, Rachel Alexander. I'm a weekly contributor to Townhall and other sites and the editor of Intellectual Conservative. And this is my mall, Ralph Benko, who worked in or with the Reagan, W. Bush, and Trump White Houses. He's a weekly columnist for Newsmax, co-author of the Capitalist Manifesto, and co-founder and executive chairman of the 187,000-member Capitalist League Facebook group. We also encourage you to go to thoughtcriminals.ning.com, sign up for our updates, and thank you to the Freedom First Network for now carrying our show. Welcome to our viewers. So today we are going to discuss a new lawsuit by the Biden administration against Arizona over its new election integrity law and how Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich is vowed to defend that law. And then we're going to pivot into some more analysis of what's going on in his race for the US Senate, which is one of the hottest races and still is, and things just continue to come out about that race. So beginning, what's going on with the lawsuit is Arizona passed this law sponsored by one of the best conservatives in the Arizona legislature, Jake Hoffman, which basically said, if you're going to vote in our federal elections for president, you have to prove that you are a citizen and show ID. Well, the Biden administration is pointing to a 2013 case by the US Supreme Court, which struck down an Arizona proposition which required ID to vote in elections because it said that that's in the jurisdiction of the federal government. There's a difference here. Jake Hoffman is a very bright young man, and so he's changed the language to make sure it complies with the law. Basically, the Constitution's elections clause says that Congress can decide these types of things in federal congressional elections. But the electors clause of the Constitution says it's up to the states to decide things in the presidential race. So that's the difference. And I believe, especially with a conservative court now that has already upheld Arizona's election integrity laws in the past, including one against, which Brnovich won, Brnovich versus DNC, which upheld a ban on ballot harvesting, and it also upheld a law that says you have to vote within your own precincts. I think there's a pretty good chance that Brnovich is going to prevail.
Well, good for him. So what I hear from you is that Joe Biden and his thugs at the U.S. Justice Department are now picking on you pure innocent little Arizonans for having passed a law.
Started out good. Okay, go on.
For having passed a law saying you have to prove your identity as an American citizen before you're allowed to vote in a presidential election. And, hey, I have to prove my identity to register a car or to take out a library book. Now, why the left, that's not reader suppression, that's not driver suppression. And why would they call confirming your identity with some kind of documentation, a birth certificate or a driver's license or a passport or something authoritative? Why would they call that voter suppression as opposed to just a good, solid anti-fraud measure? Now, by the way, I'm not exercised about this. Personally, I believe that most Latinos and sooner or later most Blacks are going to be voting Republican, and therefore we want to limit any boundaries, any inconveniences, any hassles that that do not make the election, the integrity of the election into question. We want to make it as easy as possible to vote because, heck, the Democrats are now committing political mass suicide. And why should we get in their way by making it harder for us voters who only care about things, who really mainly care about inflation and the economy and jobs and personal security and national security? And there are all these other issues that Democrats are playing lemming, all jumping off the cliff, having to do with gender, this and that, and other things that most Americans frankly, aren't particularly motivated by it. So I say the easier we make it for more people to vote, the better off the country will be, because then more people with common sense will vote, and fewer fanatics will be going out there attempting to vote to make a jihad out of who gets to use whose public bathroom. And by the way, I've had a gender neutral bathroom since in my house, since way before it was cool. So don't anybody go and say I'm not woke.
Now, I'd like to point out too that if you look at, conservative minorities, Republican minorities, they all say that the argument that you're disenfranchising minorities is a bunch of BS. They think it's insulting. We're not able to get driver's licenses. We're not able to get proof of citizenship. I mean, it's not like it's, that onerous of a task. Here in Arizona, the Arizona Free Enterprise Club is getting a bill put on our ballot, to toughen up laws in this area. But one thing it also does is offer a free voter ID. So it completely addresses claims that it's too hard to vote. And I want to point out too that Arizona Free Enterprise Club, they also pointed out that they believe over 11,000 illegal immigrants voted in the 2020 presidential election here. And so,
come on. Look, I don't want to hear any of that, because the people who claim that there was all of this phony voting, they've lost 60 out of 61 court cases, and the one court case that they won was on a procedural motion. When President Trump's Attorney General, Bob Barr, who was a total Trump loyalist, said that there was no evidence of significant voter fraud that could have changed the outcome of the election. Boy, if anybody would have fought against a corrupt election, it would have been Barr. He was a total Trump loyalist.
No, he turned on Trump, and I've been arguing for years.
Trump turned on him.
I have written columns for years about how the left dominates the legal system. They dominate the judiciary, they dominate the trial lawyers, they dominate the state bar associations, and most conservatives are terrified to speak up. I can't even get conservative attorneys in Arizona to give me quotes for my journalism articles because they are so terrified of the bar. So to try to find, a fair trial on a lot of the evidence that has come up, it's just probably not ever going to happen. And so, you know what? Our side just has to think smarter and more clever than the other side, because what are we going to do? Try to get conservatives to go into the law? There's a problem there, because a lot of conservatives who are in the law, they don't want to be targeted, and they don't want to do all the groundwork serving on really boring state bar committees when they've actually got families in church and things like that.
I don't think there's nothing more boring than church. I've been in one once or twice, and so I speak
You're
from
obviously going to the wrong church. There's lots of choices. You don't have to go to, and I'm not throwing out a denomination because I don't. But
you were thinking Presbyterian, I could tell. And
Presbyterian.
Some of my best friends are Presbyterians. What?
I grew up when I was very young in a Presbyterian church, so I'm not going to insult those guys.
I happen to have a soft spot in my heart for Presbyterians, although I lean toward the Methodists a little bit more, because Hillary Clinton do as much good for as many people as possible. What's not to love? Now, Hillary went about it in a kind of odd way. She's not a representative Methodist, but let me tell you, I love me them Methodists.
Okay, whatever works for you, Ralph. Since you're not a diehard evangelical Christian like I am.
I'm not any kind of Christian. I'm not diehard, that soft,
So if Methodist works for you, that's great.
I'm a Jew. I'm not saying I'm joining the club. I just find them fetch. I just find the Methodists to be pretty darn adorable.
Okay, so on that note, do you want to pivot to where we are at in this crazy U.S. Senate race? Because I just had an article come out in Townhall explaining how I don't understand this supposed wave of support for fake Blake Masters, who came out of nowhere, has absolutely no history other than being a very radical pro-choice libertarian who now has the Trump endorsement in the Senate race. And in fact, there was an article that just came out today in the Washington Examiner by a longtime conservative columnist named Quill Hillier, who it basically.
I'm sorry, he's a friend of mine. It's Quinn Hillier.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know you knew him. So he came out with an outstanding article entitled "Trump Endorses Strange Arizona Man Over MAGA Star." And he can't figure it out either, because Brnovich has this incredibly long record. He's basically the Ron DeSantis of Arizona. He's sued the Biden administration probably more than any elected official. But these billionaires who are funding Blake Masters have been able to spin this message that Brnovich is supposedly not a conservative. And, you know, the only thing they can really point to is right after the 2020 election, Brnovich said that he had not personally seen any election fraud yet, you know, like 2 days after the election. And he said when he looked into the Sharpie Gate, you know, thing, he didn't find anything there. So
there was nothing to see. Of course he didn't see any election fraud. There was no election fraud. And Mark Brnovich is a man of honor and a man of integrity, and he is not going to kneel down and kiss Donald Trump's boots because Donald Trump wants him to claim that there was some kind of election fraud.
Well, you and I can agree to disagree over that issue, but the point is you and I can agree to disagree, but we can still support Brnovich because as attorneys, we know that he is going about it the right way. He's not saying, oh, let's round up Maricopa County supervisors and arrest them, and we want convictions now. You can't say that. My former boss, Andrew Thomas, the Maricopa County attorney, arrested 2 Maricopa County supervisors. So he got disbarred, right? And I got my law license suspended over that. So all these people who are screaming at Brnovich and calling him a rhino, he's had 12 bar complaints against him by Democrat Secretary of State Katie Hobbs. He barely beat those, and I guarantee you the left is coming after him with more. He's the only person who has been able to finagle this delicate position and not just get disbarred while continuing to do things like combat election fraud. And the one thing I noticed, Ralph, just in the last couple of days, the fake Masters people are touting this poll, which has him 12 points ahead. Well, guess who put the poll out? It's the Democrats' own polling firm, Public Policy Polling. They have this strategy that they're doing all over the nation right now, where they are literally voting in Republican primaries, as we talked about earlier.
And misfit toys. Yes, they just dropped $1 million into Maryland, where I live, because there's an extremist, fanatical Trump endorsed candidate named Dan Cox, okay? And then there's a center-right solid Larry Hogan aspirant who was the Secretary of Labor and the Secretary of Commerce, okay? She is an absolutely solid across the board conservative, okay? And they're afraid that just like Larry Hogan is the most popular Republican governor in a blue state across the board, he's been able to keep his conservative bona fides clean. He's vetoed 41, I don't know, that's not putting it the wrong way. His predecessors enacted 41 tax increases. And in Maryland, Kelly Schultz and Larry Hogan, 0, okay? So on economics, on crime, on jobs, across the board, Kelly Schultz has an 8-year track record of fighting for equitable prosperity and for safety, funding the police and so forth for the people of Maryland, okay? Clearly a winning combination, because Larry Hogan got reelected. Larry Hogan crushed Donald Trump in the 2020 election, okay? I mean, Trump got killed 60-30 or something like that, and Hogan won by a landslide. And now he polls, way up there. Okay. So what do the Democrats, billionaires do? They give Dan Cox, who makes John Birch look like a moderate, $1 million to try to crush Kelly Schultz, to get him nominated because they figure if they get him nominated, there's no way he can win. But Kelly Schultz is a true threat to maintain the Republican majority capably and expand it here in Maryland. And so it's dirty tricks. They're doing it in
And it's
Pennsylvania.
not like you brought up about my hero on one of our previous shows. It's not following the William F. Buckley Jr. rule, which is you support the candidate who is most to the right, who is electable. And
Right.
here in Arizona, with this fake Masters, the guy is such a train wreck with such a horrible record that the Democrats are going to destroy him. And the only polls I've seen in the general election show that Brnovich versus the Democrat Mark Kelly is several points ahead of the fake Masters versus Mark Kelly.
Okay,
And
could you just go a little easier? Look, as you know, I'm sold on Brnovich, okay? Man of integrity, not quite as conservative as me, but since I'm the second most conservative man in the world, there's only one other guy out there, and he lives in the Holy Land. So I'll forgive him being, not as generous and accommodating to immigrants as I would like him to be, because that's the true conservative position, okay? But please don't call Blake Masters fake Masters, okay? Let's call him what he is and let the voters decide. Blake Masters is a libertarian, okay? He's a he's a master of the high-tech universe, a venture capitalist over there, and like a lot of those high-tech guys, left or right, he's a libertarian. And so the question is, do you want a libertarian who at least back in his collegiate days came out for open borders and other kind of oddball left field libertarian things?
and he convinced a friend growing up to become pro-choice.
Yes, okay, because back then that was the libertarian position. It might still be. Libertarians are.
I don't know. I was a registered libertarian years ago, and I was in no way pro-choice. There's a divide among libertarians.
I know.
He was radical left libertarian.
I'm willing. It was a long time ago. I'm willing to forgive him that, but I also want to be clear. Blake Masters is the libertarian candidate. Mark Brnovich is the conservative candidate. And who is the billionaire guy? What's his name? I can never remember. Lehman. He's the candidate. He's the big businessman candidate, right? Neither Brnovich nor Masters are big business people. This guy is a big business person. So look, people in Arizona have a choice. They have a choice as to who best represents their values, who is most demonstrated willing to fight for those values, and who is most likely to be able to beat Mark Kelly in the general election, because the Senate majority is very likely to hinge on that one point. But we don't need to rubbish the alternatives. The fact is, the voters I've spent a lot of time in Arizona. It's my home away from home. Okay, the people in Arizona are number one conservative with a libertarian streak. They're not libertarians with a conservative streak. Okay, they are sort of old time religion, common sense, kitchen table conservatives that also doesn't want the government, in their bedroom, but they also don't want the government opening the borders to an influx of undocumented aliens. That's trespassing. And as much as we love them, and as much as we appreciate Mexico and Central America sending us all of this foreign aid by the way of wannabe Americans, okay, there has to be an orderly process for that, and opening the borders is not it. So when the New York Times called Blake Masters from the island of misfit toys, I had to laugh out loud because it was such a perfect description of it and how the Republicans for whatever reason, are nominating a bunch of misfit toys in a bunch of races. If they had been nominating the Mark Brnoviches of this world, the kind of solid, hardworking guy who has devoted his life to public service and shown that he's willing to fight, we could win the Senate. But it looks like we're going to be kicking the Senate away, and at least we're going to be getting the House.
And what I want to address with you, Ralph, because maybe you have some thoughts on this. What has really disturbed me so much about this race is that Donald Trump, who I have admired, as you know, since he jumped in the race, how could he endorse Masters? I understand that he has Peter Thiel behind the scenes, whispering in his ear, and Thiel has been a big Trump backer. But I just am concerned because I see Trump endorsing more and more of these sketchy candidates around the country because of somebody he knows behind the scenes. And one of the top political consultants in Arizona just said to me this morning, he said, who is feeding Trump information about Arizona, because he doesn't realize what's going on, or he wouldn't have endorsed Masters.
Yeah, no, look, Trump has several talents, okay? He's charming, he's bold, and he is not afraid of engendering controversy. He loves the attention, okay? But he doesn't have any political Jones. He was a terrible president, other than things like delegating the pick of Supreme Court justices to the Federalist Society. I give him props for that. So we now have a good, solid conservative Supreme Court for the first time in my adult lifetime. So I appreciate that. Okay, but in terms of his political judgment, he's a real estate developer who turned reality TV star. He finds government boring, and he's a very much of a sort of instinctual people person. And so, according to people who I know Trump, they have told me that the way to get your way with Trump is to be the guy sitting next to him on Air Force One when they're flying back to Washington, because he does what the last person he spoke to tells him to do. He's not strong on policy. He's a people person, not a policy person. And therefore, Peter Thiel has been a Trump. First of all, Peter Thiel's a billionaire, and Trump respects that. He, thinks that, talking about Presbyterian, he was raised a Presbyterian, okay? And they believe in predestination and the marks of election. He believes that if you're rich, then that means, you're good. And Thiel made $1 billion or more, $2 billion, founding PayPal, moving on to being one of the original investors in Facebook, okay, and with Palantir, okay. I'm just finishing a book about some of his investment, some of his early startup work. Guy is brilliant. No question that he's a brilliant tech businessman, okay? And also, which Trump loves about him, is he's a contrarian. He loves to stir the pot. He loves to play provocateur. When he was at the Bitcoin conference in Miami, he took a bunch of $100 bills and tossed them into the audience in order to see the audience scramble to pick up the $100 bills. And then he teased them, saying, I thought you guys were Bitcoin maximalists who didn't care about this fiat paper currency. Okay, so I mean, Peter Thiel is a brilliant, and he's a mazik. He's a trickster, and that appeals to Trump. He's a like-minded soul. By the way, Peter was born in Germany, so the chances of Peter himself running for president are zero. And no matter how much you may fall in love with Peter, Rachel, he's not eligible to be president, and he's got a husband, so he's not even not even a potentially good romantic partner for you. Sorry, he doesn't swing you away.
Okay, all right, enough down that. So Thiel also convinced Trump to endorse J.D. Vance in Ohio, which also ticked off a lot of conservatives. A lot of them preferred like Josh Mandel over there. I'm just concerned that this type of thing by Trump is ultimately going to hurt him, because he keeps, putting feelers out there that he's going to want to run for president again in 2024. But you have all these people now becoming big fans of DeSantis. And I'm worried that if Trump keeps, turning off so many people with moves like this endorsement, is that going to sabotage his 2024 chances and just open the door for DeSantis?
It could. And by the way, I hope he declares sooner rather than later for 2024, like he's been toying with, because it will cripple his ability to raise money, and it will be a tactical blunder of the first order for him to for him to declare too soon. All of his advisors, according to everything I read, are telling him to hold off, because once you've declared, once you formed an exploratory committee or declared that you're going to be a candidate, then all kinds of FEC regulations kick in that make it much, much harder to raise money. And money's the mother's milk of politics, as your buddy.
And that's why he's delayed it so long, you know.
And that's why he's delayed it, but he's not known for his patient temperament. And so he may well declare sooner rather than later, partly because, you know, he sees that DeSantis is getting a lot of traction. People are beginning to say, hey, DeSantis is Trump with discipline. DeSantis is the guy who is a fighter like Trump, but Trump is, a lot of people, myself included, are coming to the opinion that Trump is all bark and no bite. And by the way, that works with a bunch of spineless Republicans who are intimidated by his really loud barking. Okay, but the fact is that we want somebody like Mark Brnovich, who is actually willing to bite when he's in the right. Remember the phrase that I just coined, and I want to go down in history as the author of: bite makes right.
Okay, and what about the other good phrase you came up with? Feel the
burn. Brnovich, great t-shirt. Yes, I designed that t-shirt, and I gave one to Mark and one to you, and then I kept one, and then you lost yours. I'm still wondering about that, where that t-shirt ended up. So I gave you mine because I figured, Mark, you would get more votes from you wearing it around Phoenix than from me wearing it around Maryland or
well, on that note, I think we should wrap it up. And thanks for everybody for watching, and tune in next week. We'll see you in a week.
Great. Thank you, Rachel.